In this lecture, we're going to cover microscopic bone anatomy. Compact bone is made of a bunch of units called osteons. The osteons are also called the Haversian system. It's a unit of bone that contains a central canal and then has a matrix that is in a ring formation. The central canal is the opening in the center of an osteon. It carries blood vessels and it carries nerves. And then running perpendicular to that are the perforating or Volkmann's canals, and they are perpendicular to the central canal, and they also carry blood vessels and nerves. In this diagram, you can see what an osteon looks like. So it's one of these units here, and you can see it's got concentric rings of bony matrix, and then there are the central canal, which, as you can see, is where the blood vessels are traveling, and then you can also see the perforating or Volkmann's canals, and they go perpendicular to the central canals. Within the rings, the concentric rings of an osteon, there are things called lacunae, and they are cavities, and those are housing for the bone cells, which are also called osteocytes. Osteo means bone, and so that's why cells that reside within bone are called osteocytes. The lacunae are arranged in concentric rings, and the rings are called the lamellae. And so the lamellae are rings around the central canal, and they house the lacunae, which again house the osteocytes. So this is just one piece of an osteon, right? So the rings are called lamellae, and then there's these cavities within the structure called lacunae, or lacuna is singular. And the osteocytes are the cells that reside within those cavities, and they're the ones that can make bony tissue and break bony tissue down. When you look at it under a microscope, this is what an osteon looks like. So you probably remember seeing this from when we covered tissues. So the osteon is this whole structure here. And then the lacunae, or lacuna, here's one, and there's a bunch that are located in between the lamellae. And then remember, those lamellae are those individual rings that form the osteon. Connecting the cells together are structures called canaliculi, or a canaliculus is singular. And it basically translates as tiny canals. They radiate from the central canal out to the lacunae so that the cells that are in the bony tissue can get nutrients from the blood supply. So they essentially form a transport system that connects all the bone cells to nutrients like glucose and oxygen. So here you can see the little canal that connects these two blood cells, for example, is the canaliculus, and you can see that those form between multiple blood cells and eventually connect back to the central canal so that blood supply can reach all of the cells in the bony tissue. When a human skeleton forms, it starts out as hyaline cartilage. And so then during development, much of the cartilage is replaced by bone. Cartilage does remain for your lifetime in isolated areas. So the bridge of your nose is going to be cartilage for your whole life. The parts of your ribs, specifically where your ribs articulate with your sternum, generally stay cartilaginous for your lifetime. And then your joints also will have cartilage for your whole lifetime. When bones are growing, it's also called ossification. So the epiphyseal plate, if you remember, which is in the distal ends of long bones, allows for lengthwise growth of long bones, and it occurs during childhood. New cartilage is continuously formed, and old cartilage becomes ossified, meaning that it becomes bony. Cartilage is broken down, and then it's enclosed and digested away, and then it opens up a little cavity, and then bone can fill that cavity in by replacing the cartilage through the action of cells called osteoblasts. Osteoblasts build bony matrix. While you're growing, bones are remodeled and lengthened, and that goes until growth stops, which is regulated by generally the endocrine system. Bones are remodeled in response to two different factors. So one of those is your blood calcium levels. That's why calcium is important in your diet. And the other reason bones are modified is the pull of gravity and your muscles on your skeleton. So if, for example, you were a tennis player and you had an x-ray done of your racket arm and your non-dominant arm, they probably look a little bit different because of the effect of the muscles from your racket arm on the bones in your arm. When bones grow wider, that's called appositional growth. Next, we'll cover briefly how bones grow from being cartilage to being bony. So in an embryo, most of the bone is hyaline cartilage, which is represented here by this blue color, and then bone will start to replace the cartilage as the embryo grows. So you start out with compact bone in this bony collar and some spongy bone growing into what will become eventually a medullary cavity. And as the embryo matures into a fetus, the long bone will grow a little bit in length, and it will also develop more blood supply. New bone can start to grow in the ends of the bone, where you're going to have spongy bone in the ends near joints. And by the time someone is born, the epiphyseal plate is here, where new bone is continually being formed. There's articular cartilage on the ends of the bone, so that joints are cushioned, but most of the bone is in fact mature. So there's compact bone on the outsides, and there's a medullary cavity with a large blood supply inside of long bones. There are a couple differences between bone growth and bone remodeling. Bone grows in length because cartilage can grow on the ends of bones, and cartilage can be replaced by bone, lengthening the bone. Cartilage can also grow at the epiphyseal plate, and that can cause the bone to grow longer when it's replaced by cartilage. Bone remodeling can occur even as adults, so that type of bone growth can happen all the time. Bone can be reabsorbed, and bone can be added to make a bone wider rather than longer. And bone can also become narrower if bone is reabsorbed instead of being built. The different types of bone cells that do these jobs. So osteocytes are mature bone cells. That's just the name for a general bone cell, and you don't necessarily know what its function is. An osteoblast is a bone-forming cell. An osteoclast is a bone-destroying cell. And those two work together to remodel and reshape bone. Bone remodeling is performed by both osteoblasts and osteoclasts because osteoclasts can release calcium in response to parathyroid hormone, and it causes bone to break down.